Shri Swaminarayan Bhagavan Ni Jai. Last time we were looking at Ghanshyam Charitra, and the ending was that Ghanshyam had left at the age of 11 on 29th June 1792, Ashad Sud Das. And the family members had become quite saddened, and some people had committed suicide. Ghanshyam gave them darshan in divine form and revived them and told them not to grieve, that they will meet him later on in Gujarat. And Ghanshyam went to the Saryu river, he crossed the river and he continued his journey. So we will follow him. After Ghanshyam crossed the river, he continued his journey and reaches Naimisharanya. And he stays there for a while and continues north. Then he met some ascetics in a forest. They were also going to the Himalayas to do tap penance. And they were wondering that Nilkanth is on his own and yet he's not afraid. And they are this many and yet they still fear the forest and the wild animals. Nilkanth said to them that I am the Atma. And an Atma does not have fear of death or anything. When night time came, with these noises of the wild animals ringing in the forest, the sannyasis tied their hammocks to the branches of a tree to spend the night. And they saw that Nilkanth was lying on the floor, and they feared for his life. At night, a hyena came, and they were looking from above. And to their surprise, the hyena just came and sat there for a while. And in the morning, the hyena left. And this greatly surprised the yogis, the sannyasis, that they understood Nilkanth's Mahima. After a 9-day trek, Nilkanth reached Haridwar. And there was a Kumbh Mela going on at the time. Nilkanth stayed there for some days, and Mahadevji and Parvatiji, they came as Brahmins and served Nilkanth. From there he proceeded to Tapovan, and in a mango grove he stayed there for 10 days. And during those 10 days, Laxmanji and Gangaji, they served Nilkanth. From there he continued to Sripur, and he went to a place where thousands of years ago Uddhavji had done tap and penance there. And at that spot, Naradji had built the city of Sripur. This is that famous incident we see in the Nilkanth Mystic India and the Delhi one, where the Mahant of the ashram, he tells Nilkanth to come inside at night because there's a lion roaming around here and it kills people. So when night time came, everybody started preparations to go back home and lock the doors. And the Mahant also asked Nilkanth to come in. Nilkanth said, I'm not afraid. And then there's that dialogue between, death, will a wall protect me, anyone, and so on. So Nilkanth sat under a tree, the Mahant looked out from the window, and the lion came. And to the Mahant's surprise, the lion came and sat down by Nilkanth. And next morning, Nilkanth gave Ashirvad to the lion, and the lion went back into the forest. The Mahant was very surprised and became very excited at Nilkanth. And he said to him that you become the Mahant of this mandir in Sripur. And in those days the income was 100,000 rupees a year. That is also yours, and we will be your servants. Nilkanth said that I have not come for any of this. I am on a yatra to redeem people. And Nilkanth continued and eventually reached a place called Kedarnath. In India it is said there are 12 self-born Jyotirlings, and one of them is in Kedarnath. After having the darshan of the Jyotirling and continuing his journey for 9 days, Nilkanth reached Badrinath. The pujari, seeing Nilkanth and the aura on his face of his brahmacharya and his penance, was quite attracted to Nilkanth, and he served Nilkanth, and Nilkanth stayed there until Diwali. When the winter came, the pujari told him that because it gets so cold up here, we take the murtis to lower grounds, to Joshi Mutt. So they went, and then after a few days, Nilkanth continued further north to Mansarovar. En route, he stayed for 3 months at Badrivan, which is the ashram of Narayan. During those 3 months, Narayan served Nilkanth with devotion, and before he left, Nilkanth told them that you have served me well, and in the future I will install your murtis in the mandirs. Nilkanth reached Mansarovar. He bathed in it, and also at the mouth of the Saryu river, the same river that Nilkanth was thrown into by that Asur when Nilkanth left home. The mouth of that river is in Mansarovar. So Nilkanth bathed in the mouth of the Saryu river, and then he returned to Badrinath on Akhatrij. At Badrinath, the king there, Ranjit Singh Maharaja, who was the ruler of Punjab, he was there. He met Nilkanth, and he said to Nilkanth not to leave him and be with him. Nilkanth said to him that we will meet again. Nilkanth said that we will meet again, and he continued his journey to Gangotri, and there he had the darshan at Gangaji Mandir, and he reached Haridwar. Ranjit Singh again met Nilkanth at Harkipedi, and he wanted to offer his kingdom, but Nilkanth said he was not interested. He was on a Kalyan Yatra, and he gave a glimpse of his divine personality, and from there he reached incognito to Ayodhya, and he stayed there for some time, and then from there he left. Now it had been 10 months since Nilkanth had left home, and he is continuing his journey to the upper northern eastern Himalayas to reach Bansi. In a garden in Bansi, he was meditating, and at that time 2 of the king's soldiers came there, and they fired their rifles, and 2 birds on a tree got killed and fell down. Nilkanth saw this, and that dejected him a lot because it was ahimsa. And that day, Nilkanth fasted. At midnight, he woke up, and he had this thought in his mind that let this city be burnt. And then he recalled his thought that the sadhu should be forgiving. But because of his thought, the city burst into flames. And the king and the citizens ran helter-skelter to protect themselves. At that time, Nilkanth plunged himself into the river, and the fire was extinguished. But then he took a vow that if such thoughts do come into his mind, they do not be fulfilled, they don't become fruitful. From there he continued to Vanshipur, and the king there was very pleased at seeing this brahmachari Nilkanth and took him to his palace. Nilkanth, seeing his devotion, also went with him. The king and his wife and their 2 daughters, Ila and Shushila, they served Nilkanth lovingly. The queen, seeing the qualities of Nilkanth, said to him that we will give you our kingdom and our 2 daughters' hand in marriage. Please stay here. Nilkanth said that he is not interested in these things. He hasn't come for this. He has come to redeem the Jeeves. The queen tried in many different ways to entice him about staying and saying that you will regret becoming a sannyasi and so on and so forth. But Nilkanth was adamant, and he wasn't taken in. Nilkanth eventually because of their devotion, granted them Akshardham for serving him, and then he left at night. And obviously, when people get attracted to Nilkanth like this and he leaves, they become saddened. They went out to look for him. Then Nilkanth, via Akashvani, he told the king that he would meet him again in Saurashtra. Continuing on his journey, Nilkanth went to Kalparvat in Nepal. He traveled for 1 month through dense forests. After coming out, he continued his journey for 3 days and nights. He had no food for 4 days. And because of that, he collapsed. And he managed to drag himself to a river, find some food. He bathed himself. He offered the food to the shaligram that he was carrying with him. And he did his Sandhya Vandan. And it has been now 1 year and 43 days since he left home. It was 29th August 1893, Shravan Vad Atham, Samvat 1850. Nilkanth sat under a banyan tree. At that time, an evil person, Kal Bhairav, came with his ghosts and things and told them to kill the young brahmachari. But at that time, Hanumanji came and started protecting Nilkanth, and Hanumanji hit Kal Bhairav on the head so hard that his head sank into his trunk. And Hanumanji had the darshan of Nilkanth and then disappeared, and Nilkanth continued his journey. He met some yogis en route. They were also attracted to him and asked him to stay with them. They lovingly offered him food and this and that. Nilkanth asked them, where do you get these things from? They said, we have an Akshay Patra and it fulfills our needs once a day. They served Nilkanth for 4 days, and Nilkanth was pleased with their devotion and said that when I reach the mountain of the 900,000 Naulakha Parvat, I will redeem you at that time. Nilkanth continued his journey. He passed between a valley, between 2 mountains, Dhavalgiri and Shyamgiri. Unfortunately, at that time, the valley between the two was flooded and the waters were infested with snakes and other things. And at that time, he wanted to go to Pulhashram, and it was difficult to cross. So Nilkanth walked all night and managed to cross the river and reach the Kali Gandki river. And from there he climbed 12,500 feet and reached Muktinath. He had the darshan of the Murti at the Muktinath Mandir, and he selected Pulhashram for his penance. This is the same place that Brahma's son, Pulha, had done tap here. Nilkanth was 12 years old at this time, and Bharat had also performed penance there. That is why it was all called Bharat. It was also called Bharat Kund. It was a rainy season. Nilkanth did penance, austerities for 2.5 months. His body was emaciated. And on the 11th day of Kartik, Sud, Surya Narayan gave him darshan, appeared. Nilkanth asked for a boon from Surya Narayan so that he could retain his vow of Naishtik Brahmacharya. Surya Narayan said to him that you are Purushottam Narayan. Who am I to bestow a boon upon you? Nilkanth took penance to inspire aspirants to salvation, and from there he continued his route to a place called Pokhara. En route, he met a sadhu named Mohandas, and Mohandas was greatly impressed by Nilkanth, and he saw that Nilkanth had this kamandar. Now, for whatever reasons, he got attached to that kamandar. And once they were crossing a river, and Mohandas said to Nilkanth, please watch your step. You might slip and the kamandar would break. Nilkanth was quite surprised to hear that. And when Nilkanth reached the other side, he smashed the kamandar on a stone and broke it. And Mohandas was quite surprised as to why he did this. And then Nilkanth explained to him, and he realized his mistake. And years later, Mohandas met Maharaj in Saurashtra and requested that he be given Diksha, and Maharaj initiated him as a Paramhans and named him Vrajanand Swami. Continuing on, Nilkanth reached Bhutal Nagar. In Bhutal Nagar, King Mahadat and his sister Maya Rani, they requested him to stay at their bungalow, and he stayed there for quite some time. They lovingly fed him and served him. And Nilkanth said that he has to leave because he has to redeem these souls. And he left at night. Next day, people on the queen and the king and the sister sent horsemen to look for him and requested Nilkanth to come back. And Nilkanth came back. He redeemed the king and the sister and stayed there for 5 months total. Continuing further, he went through the Himalayan forests for a journey of 1 year. There were some rishis doing tap under a banyan tree, one rishi. And as Nilkanth approached, his eyes opened and got fixated on Nilkanth. And he said that I have been doing meditation like this for many years, but nothing has disturbed me. And today you came and my eyes suddenly opened and they got fixated on you. This person was Gopal Yogi, and he realized who Nilkanth was, that he is Purushottam Narayan. Nilkanth stayed with him for 1 year, and Gopal Yogi taught him Ashtanga Yoga. He also attained the 8 Siddhis. He learned various yogic exercises. He learned the different types of Vidya. Nilkanth in turn imparted Brahmagnan to Gopal Yogi, and he redeemed his soul, performed the crematory rites, and continued on his journey. Eventually he reached Kathmandu in 1796. There, Prithvi Narayan Saha's grandson, Ram Bahadur, was the king. The king came for the darshan of Nilkanth, and Nilkanth had the darshan of Pashupatinath Mandir. The king was ill. He had tried many solutions to get cured, but nothing could cure him. And those who couldn't cure him, sannyasis and bhavas or whatever, he put them in jail. He asked Nilkanth to cure him as well. Nilkanth said to him that you are ill because of your karmas, and there's nothing that can be done about that. You can't be cured. And Nilkanth gave him advice and satsang knowledge and spiritual knowledge, and the king realized and thanked Nilkanth for giving him this knowledge and asked for forgiveness, and he also asked to be cured. Nilkanth gave him some water, and the pain that the king had in his stomach was cured. The king said that because you have helped me, please ask a gift from me. Nilkanth said, I don't want anything, but one thing, can you just free the sadhus that you have put into the jail? The king was quite pleased, the fact that Nilkanth only asked for something like this. Nilkanth continued his journey north to Tibet. He visited some various Buddhist monasteries there, and he also cast a glance at China. From there he returned to Nepal. He visited Adivara Tirth and then came to Sirpur. Nilkanth was staying in a garden in Sirpur. The king, Siddhavallabh, had the darshan and requested Nilkanth to stay with them. He said to Gopal Das to serve Nilkanth, and Gopal Das served Nilkanth quite well, and Nilkanth in turn imparted Kathavarta. There were some Bhavas who became jealous of this, the fact that the king was so attracted to Nilkanth, and they put a spell on Gopal Das and made him unconscious. Nilkanth, by moving his hand over Gopal Das, revived him. This impressed some of the Bhavas. Others were displeased and they cast spells at each other. Nilkanth eventually revived all of them and told them that you shouldn't be doing these things, but you should lead a good life. At that time, a Telangi Brahmin came there, and he had acquired an elephant and a Kalpurush from the king. But because he acquired it out of greed, his body turned ugly. And Because of this, he was ridiculed by the people. He confessed to Nilkanth about this and asked for forgiveness. Nilkanth gave his blessings and his body came back to what it was before. After celebrating Ankut and Kartik Purnima, Nilkanth left Sirpur for Assam. He arrived at the Kamakshi Mandir. It's a very big mandir there. And people seeing Nilkanth and his aura became attracted to him. Some Bhavas became jealous, especially Pibek, who used to worship Kali, and he wanted to defeat Nilkanth. Pibek originally was a good person, but because he came into some bad company, he became like this. Nilkanth was sitting in a garden doing some katha to the people and the Bhavas and sannyasis. At that time, Pibek came. The yogis who were sitting there and the people became frightened and they became very scared. Nilkanth told them not to be scared but to stay where they are. Nothing can happen to you. Pibek showed his powers to Nilkanth by throwing some dar at a tree which suddenly burnt and became carbon. And then Nilkanth said, to challenge me, why are you harassing these innocent people? So Pibek, who used to worship Kali, called Kal Bhairav and Batuk. They emerged from some smoke, but they would not go near Nilkanth. They kept staying away. Instead, they started beating Pibek up. So Pibek then called Hanumanji. Hanumanji beat Pibek up. Eventually, Nilkanth revived Pibek and told him about these things they should be doing and uplifted him and made him a better person. Continuing on, Nilkanth proceeded to Naulakha Parvat. It's called that because it's not a geographical name, Naulakha Parvat. It's called that because at that time 900,000 yogis for a very long time had been doing penance there to attain God. And Akashvani told them that Purushottam Narayan will come to redeem you tomorrow at dawn and you will have his darshan. So these yogis started preparations like building garlands, getting food ready and things like that. Nilkanth arrived and these yogis welcomed him. Nilkanth, seeing their devotion and their willingness to offer these things out of their hearts, Nilkanth took 900,000 forms and accepted the gifts individually from all of them. And then he redeemed them. And then from there he continued his journey to Navdvip, from there to Shantipur, from there to Gangasagar. And he spent 3 days there and celebrated the Makar Sankranti Mela and eventually reached Kapil Ashram. Once a Brahmin invited Nilkanth to his Krishna Mandir to dine there. Seeing the devotion of the Brahmin, Nilkanth went. They requested him to stay and said that my son Jairam Das will serve you. Nilkanth stayed for a few days and every day from a nearby lake, Jairam Das would bring fresh lotus fruits and offer them to Nilkanth. Nilkanth inquired, where are you getting these fruits from? And Jairam Das mentioned that there is a lake nearby. So Nilkanth said, let's go there, we can go for a ride on a boat. So Jairam Das called his friend Krishna Tamboli and they went to the lake and they were on the boat. And Krishna Tamboli mentioned to Nilkanth that on the opposite side of the lake there is a forest, it's quite dense and there are wild animals and fearful animals living there. Nilkanth said that he would like to row the boat for a while, so he took the oars and he was rowing the boat. At that time the wind changed direction and pushed the boat to the forest side of the lake. Nilkanth got out. These two were telling him not to go because it's getting dark and then the wild animals come here, but Nilkanth continued into the forest. So they followed him, and then as it became darker, the noises started coming from the forest of the wild animals. And then these two climbed the tree and a bear appeared and these two were watching from the tree, Jairam Das and Krishna Tambori, and the bear came, stood on its two hind legs, bowed down to Nilkanth, and it had tears in its eyes. And the two were watching from the tree that the bear bowed down to Nilkanth, and then Nilkanth said to the bear, "You can go now." So the bear went, and then these two came down, and they asked Nilkanth, "Who is this bear, and why did it bow down to you? Why did it have tears in its eyes?" Nilkanth mentioned that it was Jambuvan. He had served Sri Krishna at that time, but its salvation was left, and now it is redeemed. When they went back, this message spread to everybody, and people flocked to see Nilkanth. Early next morning, Nilkanth left. Jairam Bai searched for Nilkanth but could not be found. Nilkanth continued walking and eventually reached Jagannath Puri, and there he heard his name being called. So he turned around and he saw that Jairam Das was coming. So Jairam Das joined Nilkanth. They crossed the sea and reached Bhubaneswar and had the darshan of Mahadev there. They spent 3 days there at Janakpur, and then had the darshan of Jagannathji in the main mandir. The king there got attracted to Nilkanth and accepted Nilkanth as his guru. A Yatratra was going to take place, so the king put Nilkanth on the chariot and pulled the chariot with the other people. The Bhavas in the city got envious and became angry. And at that time, the Rath Yatra festival continued, and then Nilkanth from there went to a place called Lake Indra Dumnya, and there were some Bhavas camped there. And some Bhavas came to Nilkanth and said, "Please, pick these spinach leaves for us." Nilkanth said, "No, it's got a jeev in there, so I can't do that. That's ahimsa." So the Bhava got angry and he took out his sword. Seeing the sword, Jairam Das became scared and screamed and ran to the town, Jagannath Puri, and called the king. The king sent his soldiers, and they came, and a fight ensued, and the Bhavas died. Some ran away. Nilkanth stayed in Jagannath Puri for 10 months, and during that 10 months, as he mentions in the Vajramrita as well, that through the eyes of Jagannath Murti, he saw the devotion and the deception of the pujari, and continued his journey, which we will listen to next week.